Hey kids, it's Jurassic James, and it's Jurassic Explains looking at Hypsilophodon. So I'm super excited about this figure because I like this animal a lot. When I was a kid, we know T-Rex, Triceratops, Brachiosaurus, etc. But I remember when I was a kid that this was a figure, a species, or genus technically, that I found interesting because it was a small plant eater. And there just weren't any toys. I only have one other than this one. And so we'll just go ahead and start first by opening it with the official scissors of Jurassic James. Everyone say ooh, everyone say ah. And appreciate them. That was fast. Aggressive. I don't know why. So, we're going to... Oh, there's one more. I'm stronger than that. All right. So, Hypsilophodon, what's the big deal with this guy? What's his story? Well, first of all, I want to point out it was the first remains was uncovered by modern scientists in 1849. So, there is a whole history that I am not going to go over because I find it quite boring. It's interesting, but it's kind of, the idea that there was multiple interpretations of the animal. So the first thing to point out is that it was thought to have armor. It was thought to be in trees. It was all these things. But when you look at the anatomy of the animal, it's a ground animal. And it's often called the deer of the Cretaceous period. It's a small, flight-footed thing, right? That's herbivorous. Now, the one thing to point out is I do have only one other Hypsilophodon type of toy. Is this thing right here. You'll look at that. You'll appreciate. I'll lean in. Appreciate that. These are Collect A 2012. So I remember just to have Hypsilophodon in my collection was a really big deal. So there's a whole little family there because you can't sell tiny figures like that to kids. They'll choke on them. So we the big platform here. And so that's why I'm excited about this one because it's a bigger figure. Now, this guy would have been about 6 feet long. So again, I mentioned 6 feet, you think, but remember, this is mainly tail. The thing that sticks out the most with this figure for me is that it has these feathers. And the idea is that the specimen in England they found have no evidence of feathers, but we have relatively fine that there's some of this group of ornithopod. Sorry, I should mention that. Ornithopod means bird foot. This dinosaur is like iguanodon, the duckbills, those things. And so these are a smaller branch of that, smaller in size branch of that. And so these guys are essentially, it's kind of like imagine its cousin, iguanodon, is like a big gazelle, a wildebeest, and these are the tiny little impala. They're all walking, they're in the same kind of environment. Now, what makes Hypsilophodon so cool, one is high ridge tooth is the name. When it was named, they wanted to have it similar to iguanodon. And so, again, with fossils, if you find a fossil, you want the whole body. If you can't get that, get the skull. If you can't get that, get a tooth, at least, right? And so the idea is the tooth can tell you a lot about the animal eats, its diet, its size, right? And so, again, it's a big deal because looking at these guys, little guys here, this is how I saw Hypsilophodon my entire life, and now a generation of kids will see this. And the idea behind that is with these finding relatives of weird feather projections, and so it's almost like when you go to a doctor and you have an ailment or concern, and they go, well, your family history, do you have signs of this in your family or that in your family? Well, the idea is that when you find only parts of a skeleton, and again, they have lots of Hypsilophodon skeletons. That's not a concern there. But the conditions they were found in doesn't preserve feathers and things. So when you find its relatives, and they have weird structures and imprints, that makes you go, well, did the first guy have all that? And the general shift in paleontology right now is not of what's called I keep referring to the Jurassic Park T-Rex and how she's technically very skinny. The idea they're kind of skin tight. They would have been more chunky as an animal, and that's kind of where Paleoart's kind of moving towards. And yes, Paleoartist is a real job. You can be paid to have paleontologists explain fossils, or you explain yourself, and you can draw it up and make it work that way, right? And so Paleoart's a big thing because getting the public to understand what these animals look like beyond a skeleton. I mean, you go to most museums, you see a skeleton, there's a picture next to it or something, right? Anyway, and so these, there's no, to my knowledge, no evidence of these kind of feather projections on Hypsilophodon, but I implore, and again, we shouldn't have this idea, and I go against it, like birds, you can look at bird skeletons all day, but when you see bird feathers and plumage, it's just so varied and very different. And selected for, right? And so there's this chapter of dinosaur paleontology that I don't think I'll live to see, much less I don't think that, because, there's so much more. And I don't know, maybe technology is going so fast, but better scans, better ways of researching. But there's an idea that there's this whole dinosaur behavioral field out there, right? And it's hard to alone discover what an animal looks like, much less how it acts, right? But having feathers like this is something that wouldn't be, for me in my mind, although I'm telling you, this specimen is not saying this direct connection, to have that wouldn't be crazy to me. It wouldn't be like, oh, that's ridiculous, The idea is that these little dinosaurs, we're looking at them different ways, understanding them different ways. They're trying to hide, they have behaviors that we wouldn't understand, right? Again, when I started college, Velociraptor, we didn't know it had feathers. And then now it's like, of course it does. Why would you think it wouldn't, Anyway, so big thing to point out, this guy, as far as anatomy goes, it has the correct 4 toes. It has 5 fingers, very good. And one of it's the 5th finger kind of moves in a way they can grasp things, which is part of people, the early interpretation of them is climbing. Even in Jurassic Park, they're in trees and, like that, or their relatives are in trees. And so that's something that, arboreal dinosaurs isn't a crazy idea. Arboreal is a term for when you're living in trees, right? And so who does it live with? It's on the Island of Wight, right? Island of Wight, Wright, in south of England. It's a part of England, but it's technically an island. There's a little water between it and England. And the idea is that this guy would have been a contemporary of Iguanodon. So I have a Jurassic World Iguanodon here, and I have a safari. I want to say safari. I bought this at Dinosaur Valley State Park a few years ago. Iguanodon there. So these are like their real scientific model equivalents. Other animals that we would have lived with would have been Eotyrannus, in English, Tyrannosaur relatives. Most tyrannosaurs are found in North America or Asia. This is one of those outliers. And so there's no Jurassic World figure. They made Sinotyrannus, but they have not made this one. I don't know why. Eotyrannus is very famous in the Tyrannosaur world dinosaur. Hotly debated for many family trees. This guy living with the top predator most likely would have been Neovenator. This is a safari Neovenator. Neovenator is essentially an Allosaurus descendant in some circles, kind of thing. So there we have this guy. So it would have been a top predator for the environment, most likely. Baryonyx, I've seen references to Baryonyx in England, but not so much to the Isle of Wight. I'm not sure if I can find a paper that says otherwise. But if you don't see Baryonyx chasing this guy, and here it's my favorite mini Baryonyx. It's a so the Safari 19, what year is that? 1997. So the Oculus is very narrow. But even if it's not Baryonyx itself there is one I did a video on already called Ceratosuchops. And so this is a Spinosaurus or Baryonyx cousin. So if you're looking at it, this is the environment you would see. There are many other sauropods and other lizards. They've named even bugs in this site. But these are some of the main players. Oh, and a couple more things. There's I did a video on this already. Mantellosaurus, who, like Hypsilophodon, was first considered to be by some a juvenile or young Iguanodon, which again there's a whole topic on. I did it a couple weeks ago on baby dinosaurs, right, or little dinosaurs. And so looking at these features, you say it's similar in structure. I mean, that's a very honest mistake. It's similar in structure. It's the same environment. It's a little smaller. Maybe it's a baby. But again, looking at each bone individually and measuring them, understand how they look, compare how they move, and also how the bone grows, they know it's an adult of its own species. And they found 20 of these things together. And so this is another example of that, where we thought it was a baby, or now it's actually its own species. And finally, we have a Papopolacanthus, which is kind of like the North American Gastonia, Edmontonia, those kind of things, armor dinosaur. So these are its contemporaries who will be living together with this animal. If your non-Jurassic World figures, I would say, have them with the Neovenator, the Iguanodon, the Polacanthus not to scale, Mantellosaurus, Hypsilophodon, and Eoraptor, and possibly a Baryonyx or something like it. And then with the Jurassic World figures, which I think most of you are children watching this with your family, with your parents. So thank you for family time, with this being family time. And so here we have these guys. So this is also its contemporaries. Here's who, for this look, is what this guy's going to be living with. And so again, I would say that these guys may have lived in separate areas, or they may have been, if you're Hypsilophodon, I'd much rather hide around Iguanodons. As long as they're not attacking me, you want to hide around Iguanodons, because why? If a big predator shows up, they'll be after the big guy first. Oh, they'll probably have to use your small, but you're fast. And that's one thing to point to, is that they are fast. So you can look at the anatomy and tell if they're quick animals. One of the arguments behind that, my final main thought on this, is that if your femur, your upper leg bone, is shorter than your tibia or your shin bone, your lower leg bone, that usually means you're a runner. If you have a long femur, like a T-Rex for a human, and you have a short tibia, you're more of a walker or a short distance runner. And so these guys were definitely very fast. And I call them fast food. And again, the idea of deer of the Cretaceous period makes sense to me. Something that, it's something that's really something very nimble, very quick, and there are bigger things around it, but it is the fast of the prey items. With that being said, appreciate Hypsilophodon. I'm super happy to see this figure. This is really cool. Number of fingers and toes are correct, which is a big deal for me personally. You know that already. If you watch this channel very regularly, I'm always railing against that. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys next week. Yeah, I bought 2. I'm probably going to buy more.